VeggieTales. VeggieTales. Vegetable tales. Vegetable stories. Hi, I'm a vegetable. And if that thought experiment worked, you now realize that VeggieTales, the popular kids show, is a collection of stories about vegetables. For those of you who might not be familiar with the hit Christian kids show VeggieTales, it's an animation and a media franchise created in 1993 by Phil Vischer and Mike Naraki that aimed to convey Christian moral themes and teach biblical values to a child-based audience. Since then, the franchise has undergone a number of creative and managerial changes. The show had several film adaptations, including Jonah and the Pirates Who Don't Do Anything, and even had a brief stint on Netflix as VeggieTales in the House, followed by VeggieTales in the City. VeggieTales has had anything but a smooth history, running into numerous financial and legal problems during and after the production of Jonah in 2002, resulting in a nearly 20-year legal tailspin filled with drama and mystery. But enough drama. Let's talk adaptation theory. First of all, what is it? Adaptation theory is the very broad study of how books are turned into movies. Adaptation theory seeks to analyze and interpret how and why people turn words into moving images. Book, movie. Book, TV show. Adaptation theory seeks to understand the process that comes in between all these media. Now, you might be saying to yourself, theory schmeary, how come I've never heard of adaptation theory? I don't know, read a book. Well, adaptation and film theorist Thomas Leach would say you've never heard of it because
adaptation theory has remained tangential to the thrust of film study because it has never been undertaken with conviction and theoretical rigor.
Wait, no, that's the wrong one. He'd say you've never heard of it because
adaptation studies have only been practiced in a theoretical vacuum.
In other words, the reason adaptation study remains obscure within film studies is because boring and weird. Let me be a little bit more clear. Adaptation theory is hard to pinpoint academically because it's so frequently overshadowed by disciplines like screenwriting. On top of that, there's not a whole lot of current literature surrounding adaptation, so it's something generally neglected or ignored by filmmakers. That's not to say adaptations aren't happening. In fact, there are more film adaptations happening these days than probably ever before. But let's not confuse practice with theory, and that brings us to VeggieTales.
And so what we have learned applies to our lives today.
In the early years of VeggieTales, many of the episodes were based on stories from the Bible. It's retained a lot of its biblical influence, but as the years went on, it started to draw on many other texts for inspiration and parody. Indiana Jones, Lord of the Rings, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Batman, Gilligan's Island, Wallace and Gromit, Star Trek, Sherlock Holmes, and I could go on, but I won't. For the sake of this video, I'm just going to stick to the Bible, but you get the big idea. So, how does VeggieTales adapt stories from the Bible? It does do that. Sort of. It's hard to communicate nuanced religious messages to children using a cast of literal vegetables, so VeggieTales takes a very simplistic approach to telling these stories. Let's take a look at Josh and the Big Wall, for example. This episode is a retelling of the Bible story of Joshua and the Battle of Jericho, the first battle fought by the Israelites in the course of their post-Exodus conquest of Canaan. There's not a lot of historical or archaeological evidence to support the fall of Jericho as depicted in the Bible, but that's a topic for another day. In the VeggieTales version, a bunch of French peas taunt a silly pickle with some slushies. It's clearly a very child-oriented retelling. There's no excess of accuracy. But that's the point. It's VeggieTales. It's a kid's show. But does that make it a less valuable adaptation? In adaptation theory, the word fidelity is used to describe the accuracy of an adaptation in relation to its source text. Generally speaking, it's not constructive to use fidelity as a measurement of the quality of an adaptation, though there are people who critique inaccurate adaptations as examples of deformation, violation, vulgarization, and desecration. But those people are bitches, and I'll tell you why. Number 1. Strict fidelity is impossible. No, I'm not going to explain that. I'm just saying it's true. Just keep going. Number 2. Strict fidelity would be boring to watch. Number 3. The idea of fidelity suggests that there's one definite essence that can be extracted from a text, and that's not the case. The demand for fidelity ignores the actual process of making films. If you want a good essay on why fidelity is dumb, go read Robert Stamm's Beyond Fidelity. Now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about the real reasons VeggieTales is a bad adaptation of the Bible. Yes, that's right, this bad boy is here to slander VeggieTales. It should be noted that while not all VeggieTales episodes cover biblical stories, most episodes include some biblical moral, such as love thy neighbor or don't fib.
And so what we have learned applies to our lives today.
Now, there's 2 main reasons I think VeggieTales is a less than desirable adaptation, and they both deal with race. So if you are or have a race, you might want to skip ahead, because things are about to get a little racy. Number 1. VeggieTales ignores critical parts of the Bible. VeggieTales is family friendly. We've been over this. Keep up. But because of this, it's able to shy away from some of the more mature topics that the Bible deals with. Topics like slavery, violence, sexuality, and prejudice. Again, though, that's the whole point of the vegetables thing. I don't think that anyone would argue that we need to make kids' content more violent or more sexual, but what about more educational? For example, when do we teach our kids about race? I don't have any kids, so I don't have an answer to that, but I know the answer is not never. The Bible constantly deals with issues of race and ethnicity. Take the entire book of Exodus, for example. Israelites living in Egypt, descendants of Joseph, the Israelites. The Egyptians were like, we don't like you because of your ethno-religious identity, and then they did genocide and slavery. I don't think VeggieTales needs to depict all the gory details of this story, but a little bit of accuracy and empathy goes a long way. Now, I know I just went on a long rant about how fidelity isn't the most important part of an adaptation, but what about tonal accuracy? The Prince of Egypt is a 1998 animated film that also tells the story of Exodus. This film, although perhaps a little bit too intense for the extremely young, has 2 things going for it. 1, it's accurate. And 2, it's sensitive. And 3, it's just a great movie overall, would highly recommend it. Now, it's not perfectly accurate, and perhaps it's not as sensitive as it could be, but at least it tries for that tone. Ignoring race, even in a silly vegetable cartoon, is a sign of whiteness and of privilege. Now let me explain. When we turn whiteness invisible, we make it the default. Just human. We're just people, you know? There is, according to film theorist Richard Dyer, no more powerful position than that of being just human. The claim to power is the claim to speak for the commonality of all humanity. Raced people can't do that. They can only speak for their race. When we make whiteness the default, we start to define other races by tropes and stereotypes. VeggieTales demonstrates this phenomenon excellently, which brings me to my next point. Number 2. VeggieTales villains have non-white voices. Mr. Nezer is one of VeggieTales' few black-coded characters.
But this afternoon, everyone will meet the new bunny, and it's gonna be a beautiful thing when everybody bows down and sings the bunny song.
He was voiced by a white actor until the Netflix show VeggieTales in the House, because surprise, surprise, Warner Bros. Doesn't approve of interracial casting. Not the porn one, the acting one. Although, now that I think about it, they probably don't approve of the porn one either. In VeggieTales in the House, Mr. Nezer was played by actor and musician David Mann, but in the 2019 revival, The VeggieTales Show, Phil Vischer returns to voice Mr. Nezer.
Oh, that's gonna leave a mark.
Mr. Lunt speaks with a stereotypical Spanish accent, voiced by the same white actor. The French peas are, well, they're French. This trend mirrors similar casting choices in other films and TV shows. Look no further than The Lion King. Sociolinguist Calvin Gidney, in his essay about the use of foreign dialect in children's programming, points out that Scar has a British accent, and that the hyenas speak in African American English and English with a Spanish accent. My point is this. You don't need hundreds of pages of lexical analysis to tell you that white people making stereotypical voices for bad vegetables is kinda shitty. So, what did we learn today? VeggieTales sucks. Just kidding. VeggieTales is a very funny and lighthearted show that teaches many valuable lessons. And not just lessons for Christians, lessons that anyone can benefit from. So before you get all upset and go down in the comments like, "You'll never cancel my heterosexual vegetables," I'm not trying to cancel VeggieTales. What we've done here today is a critical analysis. It's important to examine the media we consume so that we can learn from our mistakes going forward. I hope you found this video educational or at least interesting. If you like this stuff, consider subscribing. It means a lot to us. Oh, look at that. We're almost at 400. Crazy. In conclusion, God made you special, and He loves you very much. Bye!